William Walker Atkinson's The New Psychology, Its Message, Principles, and Practice. Chapter 4 was Consciousness and Beyond. This is Chapter 5, The Subconscious. As we have said, the new psychology concerns itself to a marked degree with the activities of the subconscious region of the mind. Instead of regarding these activities as abnormal and worthy only of scientific interest, it knows and teaches that in this region of the mind the greater part of the mentative work is performed, and that work of great value may be produced by an intelligent ordering of the subconscious activities. It is in this difference, in the consideration of these faculties, activities, and capabilities, that the new psychology differs radically from the old psychology. A new field of thought, work, and activity is opened out to every individual when he is made acquainted with the subconscious region of mentation and its laws. In this connection, we must ask you to note the distinction made in this work between the subconscious region or plane and the superconscious. The subconscious plane is below the field of consciousness. The superconscious plane is above the conscious field. To many students of popular metaphysics, New Thought, and the newer views of psychology, the subconscious plane of mind, or the subconscious mind as it is usually called in the popular works, is usually regarded as something spiritual, extraordinary, soulful, mystic, something having properties and qualities far beyond the ordinary mind. But the new psychology does not so hold. Although it admits the existence of a superconscious region or plane of mind which has activities which may be considered supernormal and unusual, to the new psychology, the subconscious mind is simply the plane or region of the mind in which is stored up a great variety of impressions from the past of the individual and of the race. In that region of the mind is to be found those strange impressions which have come down to us through the ages of time, the inheritances of the race, which manifest as instinct and instinctive feeling. Many things that were experienced by our ancestors come down to us in the shape of impressions that are reproduced in the field of consciousness with more or less clearness, as opportunity demands. Our feelings, likes and dislikes, prejudices, tastes, inclinations, and other mental states which rise up to the field of consciousness from time to time, the mental qualities which are in our subconsciousness from our birth, come to us in this way. The individual has the benefit of all the experience of the race acquired through the ages, the essence of which is impressed upon his subconscious mentality. Besides this, each individual has a certain natural character which is his from birth, and by reason of direct inheritance, which is also impressed upon his subconscious mentality. It is true, very true, that the individual may alter and radically change his natural character by the methods of the new psychology, but the fact remains that the individual has a certain natural character of his own, independent of his training. Everyone has his or her own natural tastes and preferences, likes and dislikes, character, nature. Every mother of a large family knows that no two children of the little brood has the same disposition or nature. Every teacher knows that each child has its particular personality. Every individual has his own personality. And the things that go to make up that particular personality are the impressions contained in the subconscious plane of the mind. But these inherited impressions are only a part of the material of that wondrous mental storehouse. From the time that the child is able to recognize the outer world, it begins acquiring new impressions, all of which are duly recorded in the subconsciousness. Each little bit of experience gained by the conscious mind is then passed on to the subconscious region, is impressed upon the mental phonographic records of that region. The depth and clearness of the impression depends upon the degree of attention and interest bestowed upon the original subject or object that produced the impressions. The things that interest us attract the greater degree of attention. And the greater the degree of attention, the deeper and clearer the subconscious impression. You see then that this subconscious region of the mind is something very similar to that which we have called memory. only that it occupies a larger field and has greater activities than those formerly attributed to memory. The faculty or activities that we call memory are simply a portion of a greater field, a greater memory, that we call the subconscious region of the mind. By bearing this in mind, you will be able to form a much clearer idea of the subconscious plane. Excuse me. In addition to the above stated kind of impressions, the subconsciousness contains records of many things that have been suggested to the person and then allowed to pass unchallenged to the subconscious storehouse. We believe in many things without question and accept them as truth, which have never been subjected to the scrutiny of our reasoning faculties or judgment. We have swallowed them whole, just because we heard someone say them with an air of authority, or else read them in the same way, or perhaps we heard them repeated so often that we took it for granted that they were true, or else we saw that everyone else seemed to believe and accept them, and we followed the custom. A little self-examination will startle anyone at the revelations along this line. Very few things have been submitted to reason or judgment. It is so much easier to take them in the capsule of authority, custom, or repetition. And after we have so accepted them, and particularly after we have acquiesced a number of times in their verity, we will claim them as our very own, and will defend them vigorously, and will resent any attack upon their virtue and validity, just as if we had originally thought them all out, and submitted them to the scrutiny of our reason. Those of us who have felt compelled to throw out from our minds some of these cuckoo eggs of thought will realize fully how much attached we had become to these false children of our minds, and how much distress it caused us to show them the mental door after having entertained them so long as our very own. The subconsciousness is very full of this class of impressions. Another class of impressions is contained in this subconscious region, the impressions of habit. We know how we may acquire the habit of performing tasks, difficult at first, until at last we were able to do them without thinking. The piano player, the operator of the typewriter, the sewing machine operator, the telegrapher, the typesetter, and many other performers of tasks know that while at first they had to watch each step of the work and to guard every motion, they gradually became more expert until at last they were able to perform the task with a minimum of attention, and often while a portion of their mind was occupied in thinking of something entirely different. The subconsciousness has taken over the task and performs it almost automatically. We must not overlook the fact that the subconsciousness also contains the impressions that manifest in the operation of the physical functions of the body, which are almost altogether performed involuntarily and along subconscious lines. The heart beats without our knowledge, consciousness, or volition. While we may take over the process of breathing, the greater part of this work of respiration is performed subconsciously and involuntarily. The work of digestion, the circulation, and the 1,001 other functions of the body are performed without reference to the consciousness. It is only when something goes wrong that the conscious mind becomes aware of that the internal organs are there. All of this work is a part of the subconscious activities. But remember this, that in the course of evolution, each of these automatic and involuntary movements and actions was learned by experience, and after being mastered by our earlier progenitors, it was then passed on to the region of the subconscious, the race memory, in a manner similar to that whereby we pass on the acts of walking, piano playing, and other acquired physical movements. The subconsciousness is a busy place, a hive of industry. For remember this, that although we have spoken of it as merely a great storehouse of race memories, and individual memories in the broad sense, excuse me, yet it is more than a storehouse devoid of activities. It is filled with active working faculties and mental machinery. As we have said elsewhere, The activities of the subconscious region forcibly remind one of a workshop filled with active, earnest, faithful, tiny workers, willing and anxious to do the work of the individual, if they are only told what is needed. And it is in directing these tiny workers of the subconscious mind that the new psychology becomes so useful to the student. Not content with simply allowing the subconscious to store away impressions, and then to reproduce only those absolutely necessary to the ordinary mind, it teaches that a high degree of activity may be encouraged in that region, and thereby the individual's efficiency to himself and to the community may be greatly increased. You see, then, that the subconscious region contains only that which has been placed in it by the race or the individual. It originates nothing new, although it can be used to form countless new combinations of its materials, and thus perform wonderful creative work for its owner. By the use of the imagination, the subconscious region may be made to unfold great stores of material, arranged in orderly system, and capable of being grouped together in new and strange combinations. This is invention. The so-called higher powers of the mind are not to be found in the subconscious region. They belong to the superconscious plane, as we shall see in the next chapter. In this connection, we think it well to state an idea of our own, which is not mentioned generally in writings or teachings along these lines. We allude to the possession of certain lower forms of unusual psychic power by some persons, the forms of which lack the elements of the so-called higher powers just alluded to, but still are outside of the ordinary forms of sense impressions. By some of these phases of phenomena are called the lower psychic faculties. The persons possessing and manifesting these powers are often far from being advanced spiritually, mentally, or morally. And this fact has surprised and perplexed many of the investigators of the subject. This class of phenomena differs materially from that of the superconsciousness, and evidently belongs to a lower plane. And yet, to what plane? Not to consciousness, surely. And if the subconsciousness is merely a record of race impressions and individual experiences, etc., how can these phenomena be accredited to it? We have thought it likely that these lower psychic activities may be the result of faculties formerly exercised by the race, but since discarded in the course of evolution, and now found only as vestigial remnants in some of the race. This view finds corroboration in a study of the mental activities of the lower animals and the primitive races of man, in both of which we find evidences of sensing other than those manifested by man. The animals and lower races have a sense of smell almost abnormal to civilized man, and they may have, and seem to have, other means of sensing objects. If this be true, then each of us must have some record of these discarded senses in our subconsciousness, which in some cases give rise to those instances of strange awareness noted in certain people, and which belong to the class of lower psychic phenomena, as distinguished from the higher psychic phenomena belonging to the class of genius, intuition, spirituality, etc. We do not insist upon this theory. It is merely a conjecture, offered for what it may be worth. It certainly seems to fill in a gap in the study of abnormal psychology. Let us now pass on to the region of the superconscious, the higher planes of the mind. Chapter 6 will be the superconscious.